Hi, welcome to Radcliffe. My name is John Huth, and I'm a member of the Ventures faculty for the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, hosting this lecture in the lecture series. So today, we're honored to have Keith Ellenbogen, who is going to talk to us about ocean photography, and in particular, the linkage to inspiring conservation. He is a highly acclaimed professional photographer who got his MFA from the Parsons School of Design. He has a huge number of awards, so I'm not a big believer in long introductions, but suffice to say that he does. The most recent endeavor that I'm aware of was he spent time at the Doc Edgerton Center for High-Speed Imaging at MIT. For those of you who aren't familiar with Doc Edgerton, he was one of the people who pioneered this idea of high-speed photography. Like you can see a bullet going through an apple, for example. There are many iconic photographs up there. And he was working with a physics professor, Alan Adams, on high-speed photography with an underwater focus. And because I'm a fan of fluid dynamics, I'm hoping I'll see one photograph on the topic. So the format is for the talk. At the end, questions will be open to the audience, and we'll take them as long as we can. So, Keith.
Thanks. Hello. Is this, can you all hear me? I'd like to thank you, John, and for Radcliffe Institute for having me here. It's really very nice. So welcome. Today I'd like to talk to you about taking you all on a journey beneath the ocean into an underwater world. We're a visual culture, and photography has the power to captivate our attention and spark conservation. This is a picture of a barrier reef taken within the remote Totoya Islands in Fiji. On this assignment, I was fortunate to have 8 hours of flight time on a helicopter and was able to capture what a barrier reef looks like and how the barrier reef absorbs the energy of the ocean waves from the island itself. But it's the underwater images that are not easily seen by people around the world that I'm interested in sharing with you today. So I'd like to take you all on a journey underwater and on expeditions around the world. All right, so first, what is it like to travel with me on an assignment? You need a lot of equipment, both photography equipment, underwater equipment, housing equipment, dive gear, and then you need redundant systems for everything. Once you travel to these remote parts of the world, it's what you bring is what you have, so you need all of it with you. And once you get used to having stuff, you want more. So here's what it looks like when I'm on a boat and the seas are calm. I use basically Canon 5D Mark II, which is a DSLR camera, so I have adjustable lenses and full control over all of the equipment. I also use a CNC underwater housing, which basically means that the camera is sealed in a housing and I have full control. And there are two YS250 strobes, which means I can control all the light and the camera underwater. And so that's very important in the art of photography in terms of capturing the image that you're interested in taking. So underwater photography has all sorts of challenges and problems. First of all, you're underwater. So you have limited time, air, depth, and you have to find the animals. This picture was taken of me just the other day on an assignment in Belize, photographing NASA groupers. I'm at 130 or 40 feet here of water. And so you have a very short amount of time to see and find what you want to do. But why I like this picture is it was filmed by someone else using a little GoPro camera. And what it caught was my strobes going off as I'm taking a picture. And what this shows is how you illuminate an area in front of you to capture an image. And I want to really highlight that all of photography is about finding the right light and capturing light in a lot of ways. And so one of the things that's really important is controlling where the light will be and what you're photographing. So when people think of a coral reef or reefs around the world, what they think of is lots of fish, pretty colors, and taking them. And so I want to describe a little bit about what it means to be a photographer before we go forward. And here you can see that the images of what you want to see is all the little fish coming at you. It's always fun when they're facing you rather than facing away. And in order to have this, the fish are swimming in there's a strong ebb of a current that's moving, really actually quite pulsing, fairly strong. And so I'm swimming inverted to the current holding my breath while sort of not really breathing here, stabilizing while they ebb and flow into a photograph, because you want to fill the blue with this beautiful complementary color of the orange. In underwater photography, the object is to be close to your subject. On land, you can be far. You can have telephoto lenses. You can sit and wait. But in an underwater environment, we need to be close to what we're seeing. And so when I say close, it's best when they're within 6 inches to a couple of feet away. Less over 6 feet starts to be more difficult. So I thought I would just start with what everyone always assumes: I just make it to a place and I take some pictures. But I wanted to sort of highlight to start what it means to take a picture. This is in Indonesia, in Raja Ampat, and these are karst islands, which means they're limestone islands, and they have an overshadow here. But we want to look underwater, and this is what I want to do, is take a picture of the underwater environment. And really what I want to show are 3 levels of something. 1, corals to the island, which you can see here with the black, and then up in the top right corner, you can see the trees and through to the sky. And what I noticed was, and you can see there's a little silver part in the center where the black is. It's a sort of a just fortuitous moment where there were Coven blenny that were spawning, and all the little juveniles were there. And I saw them swim in big numbers. And what I didn't like about this picture was the black of the entire island, but it's what I saw. And so when you wait for photography and are patient, what you end up is being able to compose an image much the way you preconceived it in your own mind, and then allow that picture to come to life through being prepared for moments with photography. Here's just another example of it in the Amazon. This was taken of a pink, this is a dolphin, a river dolphin down in the Amazon, and this was taken with a GoPro. And under normal circumstances, I would have said it was okay. But if you want, what you can do is control the light so it has a more angelic feeling that really is representative of the environment that we're seeing. And so I want to just highlight that when you're seeing these pictures, they're taken with a lot of intent for what I want to use, and controlling the camera and the light in such a way as to make the image what I feel is compelling, or my vision of them. So how do you capture some of these kind of images? I can only start by saying patience and more patience. This is my, what I would say is maybe my best bird shot I ever have taken. And it was a moment where I was in Mexico. The weather was really terrible, and we were doing a project on local communities and small-scale fisheries. And I noticed that these birds were diving in the same area almost every day, all the time. And when the weather was bad and we were just stopped, and I just was observing this. And then after I got my shots for the assignment, I had a day and a half left. I said to myself, I'm just going to try for this. And this is the kind of shot that you don't do anything else other than set up for one shot. I was just prepared for this only shot. I stood in an area and I waited. And when I say I waited, I wasn't just like sitting there talking to myself. I was waiting, half an eye in the water, half an eye looking at the birds. Strobe in, strobe out, and just waiting. And all of a sudden they would do it, and I had varying forms of success, but not the success I wanted. And then all of a sudden it came through and it landed. And when a bird like this flies, they're really fast, and then they stall out right in front of you and virtually stop. It's absolutely incredible. And then it flies again. It can't land in the water. If it were to land in the water, it would drown. And so at this very moment, I pulled the trigger, and I looked at my assistant behind me, and I said, I think I might have got it. I was so nervous. Anyway, I did look, and then I rushed back to the place and opened it up to see how it goes. Here's an example of river herring, of a photograph where you're going to see the animal. They're there, but you want to control the environment, because what was so interesting to me is the turbulence in there of the water moving. And what I wanted to photograph was each bubble moving, and to show the rapidness of it and stopping that motion of each bubble, so the thing was totally frozen. So you get a real strong feeling of motion moving in a very strong current. Sometimes you end up with moments that are just by chance you happen to find them. This is a jellyfish, and if you look inside the tentacles, you can see all these little juvenile fish that are swimming, that are in there. And when I noticed it, what I wanted to do is drift with it and create a composition. So I'm looking up at the jellyfish, and through the texture is the sky, is the water surface, and then the white is a little bit of the sky. So to create a composition as well, and to wait for the jellyfish to move in such a way as that you can see the fish. In Palau, these are humphead wrasse. They're big. They're like 5 feet long. This is one of the few places in the world where you can see them, and they'll actually come and integrate close with you. And so this is an endangered species of which it was a picture that was used by Canon to help support like Canon as wildlife as Canon sees it. And it's to help endangered species get awareness and to use photography in a way to engage with an animal. And only when they come up close, and again, a lot of underwater photography is that sort of vision or ability to get close to an animal. Here are a few other moments in terms of where this is a story of aggregating, mating tiger grouper, and they've changed their entire coloration here, and it's like a mirror and a reflection. Now, I knew they would do this kind of behavior. I wasn't sure if they would do it while I was there, and what they do is they just stare at each other for a brief moment, and then they don't have a violent interaction, but it's just a showdown. It's a really extraordinary thing, and it's like a reflection in the sea of each other. And you only see this coloration for a very short time when they're during the spawning season. And sometimes in photography, you see that animals are equally as intelligent as we think we are. And in the water here in photography, one of the challenges is how do you actually photograph something, and what are the modes that make photography complicated? And I noticed that this sea lion kept spinning me into the sun so that it was constantly backlit. And I would keep trying to do the same tricks where I would move away and it would look at me. But it didn't. And eventually, one of the other sea lions sort of blocked the light, and it sort of engaged in a way. And you realize that they are very aware of the elements as well as I'm aware of. So this, you wouldn't notice it, but this is probably one of the hardest pictures I've taken. This is a purple-eyed dwarf goby. It's teeny. It was taken in Fiji. And it was just drifting off of the edge of water, of the shelf of the reef. And why it's so difficult is because this is taken at the macro lens. And it was, what you want to do is in this, it was taken in daylight. And the black is a result of how you set the camera so that you don't have that. And what you want is a strong focus one-to-one on the one animal, and then you want to blur everything else in the background and keep things in line. But when you're drifting, it's really hard to do. And so no one believes me that I practice and control my body, my movement, and my strength. And that's the kind of image that was really hard, and where you're focusing, you ever focus really close and it's hard to keep track of things. That's what this was an exercise in. But they don't move very much, so that was helpful. So I'd like to take you now on a little journey all the way around the world to the Phoenix Islands. This is a place in between Fiji and Hawaii. And you can see there's a very small dot in the very center there. That's where we were. It was an assignment with the New England Aquarium and partners with Conservation International, and there was scientists from Woods Hole as well there. And so in this place, this was one of those assignments where it's become one of the largest marine protected areas and no-take zones. The aquarium is doing tremendous work in terms of conservation efforts, studying about this place, and conserving it. And what you get to see in here are juvenile black-tip reef sharks that are used the lagoon as a place to grow up and mature a little bit. You see beautiful coral reefs here. This is a place that only few have been to. And again, the sharks peruse the shelf of the outer reef, just slowly looking. As we begin to look into the reef, into some of the things, you see some small details. You can see all three little shrimp. They're sort of translucent, hiding in there. To various crabs that are there. And here's what some of the scientists were doing. They were taking large core samples. Because these corals grew in really very, very large, they're in pristine waters. They're relatively not interfered with too many human interactions. And so they take these large coral samples and they look at ocean acidification, temperature, and a whole bunch of other things back here in Boston. And then they'll write up papers and have a whole bunch of publications. But what makes conservation and photography and integrating the two so wonderful, to me, it was a moment here where this is President Tong of the Kiribati Islands with John Kerry in the background. And what the New England Aquarium has been doing is they've been working with them. And he gave a presentation that was asked for on large oceans, on becoming marine protected areas. And he used many of the pictures that I had taken from this assignment, albeit there aren't many photographers who have been there, but he did use them nonetheless. And is a way to show what it's like to be in a place, because it's hard to communicate what visuals are of a place without actually seeing them. And that it's that complementary interaction between scientists and between photographers that I think engage the community about a place and make people feel connected to it. On an assignment to the Turtle Islands, which is in the Philippines and Malaysia, it's an assignment about bilateral countries working together. In this area of, in this one particular area, there's sea turtles, green sea turtles. Worldwide, their populations are really endangered. But in this one area, there are really lots of them all over the place. And every morning you would see sea turtles just walking up you wouldn't see sea turtles, you'd see the remnants of sea turtles there. They protected the areas, and this is how they would be marked. And every day we looked for mating sea turtles. And for the 3 weeks I was there, we really didn't see them, to be honest with you. And the only way I was able to see them was, finally I was sort of frustrated that we weren't seeing them. We couldn't cover enough ground. They weren't coming up to the surface. So I was towed behind a boat like a water skier, but slowly, and just towed over long distances. And when I saw it, finally, I would break off with my camera and snorkel and free dive with these for a while. And that's how I would spend time. And they can easily swim away, but they decided to stay with you. I think they must have enjoyed the experience. Anyway, those are mating sea turtles. And this is one of those assignments where there really aren't enough hours in a day. During the day, you're looking for sea turtles and other coral reefs and animals in the reef. And at night is when they do all the laying of the eggs. And so basically my day would start really early. And at night, when here they would lay their eggs, and you would see again the slow motion of the image. You would see the eggs that are laid here. And in the different approaches, in the Philippines, they let the turtles lay the eggs, and as the turtles laid them, they left them there. But in the Malaysia, they took the eggs and they put them into containers at different depths so that the males became males and females became females, and then they took the hatchlings and released them into the ocean. Two different approaches, both seem to be working. You ever wonder what it's like to be a sea turtle when they first go out at 5 in the morning? Here's the little wave that it sees, and when you're underwater, this is what it looks like. And there he is on his little swim. Sometimes nature just finds and adapts to different conditions. And so here's a bottle cap that a crab found. And I thought I would just share a little story of what happens on an assignment and why you need so much equipment. This harmless little cord here, I thought got pinched. And when I was underwater taking pictures, all of a sudden my strobes didn't flash. And I said to myself, well, maybe I've been tired. I've been working since midnight. I'm up at 5 o'clock every morning. It's been 3 weeks like this. Maybe I messed up. Anyway, I bring it back, and I put it back, and I noticed the second camera, same problem. Both cameras don't work. And I show it to one of the guys, and he says to me, you know what happened? I was like, no. A mouse came and ate only the plastic of my cords and wrecked all of them. Now I only had 2 left, and I'm heading on an assignment for another 3 weeks. I have to take a day from where I was because you had to only get there by boat. There's no internet, no cell phones, no anything. A day boat ride to go, all the fuel I had to burn to go to land, send an email. I'm embarrassed to fess this up, but I did have to email my mother to help coordinate with everyone while I was off the grid. Had to get 2 more for the next one because you don't want to be without the appropriate equipment. And one other conservation story that I think is really meaningful is the Atlantic bluefin tuna. These ones every year go on an annual migration to reproduce, and you can see them in big numbers. And what they do was in the Mediterranean Sea, where you could see eye to eye, water to water, in one area when they found the tuna, you could see all those blips or dots on the boat are where the tuna, or where the fishing boats are going to catch the tuna. And I can tell you that in 1 month of fishing that are licensed for legal fishing, they caught the quota in 1 day, to give you a sense of how much scale that they're catching. It's legal, it's a good way to do it, but then it's the next days that were becoming the problems of the fishing. And what they would do is they would use these purseiner fishing techniques. They would swim out, they would scoop up all the tuna. They had planes overhead to spot them, what they're not supposed to do. They threw food in the water, what they're not supposed to do. They did everything they're not supposed to do. They catch all of them, and they round them up, and then they put them in these giant cages. And you can see the tugboat going through the scale of the purseiner nets, and to give you a sense of scale, the people in the foreground, like this. And what we did is we would dive in, and sometimes we would see them in the water, and sometimes we would see them in the purseine nets. And they're an incredible animal. I've never been next to a fish like this. And to give you a sense of what the power of it is when it swam by you, it was like being in a concert where you feel the ripple of a bass going through your chest as you move back from pure power of a fish just moving on you. When we did these very quick dives in, they would basically drive the Zodiac, a little quick boat. He'd go, you have 2 minutes to get in the water and get out, because the fishermen were not exactly happy we were doing this all the time. This is how the sea looks when it looks like you're going down on it. It's just as large of a net as you can be. And when you drop down to about 150 or 160 feet, this is looking back up to try and give a scale of how large these nets are. They're actually quite spacious in there, and the fish you're not like packed in like a tiny little net. And this is the picture for me that's been the most widely used of all my photographs. This picture is of the tuna. You can see how reflective they are, which is what makes them so hard to photograph. And what makes it so proud for me is it was used as the picture to represent the species when it was going up for a vote as an endangered animal. Unfortunately, many countries abstained from that vote, so it didn't go through. But it still feels very proud to me that they used this photo to represent its species. And we spent 3 months, and I only had 3 or 4 days of opportunities really seeing the tuna. So I thought I would just transition for a little bit into the art of photography and just show some things that I thought were just really beautiful, because I feel nature is so spectacular in many ways. This is in Jellyfish Lake in Raja Ampat. Here you can start to see texture. These are eggs of clownfish, and you can see they're still in the case, and all the dots are little eye pupils. And I think it's for, if you're pinhole photography, there's a certain size that the eye has to be for it to actually see certain things. So I believe there are oversized eyes for really, it's such a small creature. Here's what polyps look like when they're open at night. Some of the just beautiful sort of what feels like a painterly side of a clam. And you can see on the very bottom, while it may look like a simple and a static picture, they're actually fairly quick to close if there's any movement. They have a lot of eyes. All the little on the very top and on the bottom, you can see little like highlights, like little, it almost looks white on the screen. Those are all eyes all around the shell of this. Just some of the movements. What's interesting to me about nature in many ways is that color becomes a thing. We often just say pink or yellow or red, but texture really, there's a strong gradation in terms of coloration. Using flatness where they're all on the same plane and finding ones so that repetition becomes interesting. Sometimes it's about the creatures that blend into this, of which one you can see him in the center there. It's a crab with its eye facing to the left towards this way. A pygmy seahorse blending in. And some little motion of a tiny crinoid as it starts to crawl through an anemone. And lastly, when you want to flatten out an image so that it becomes flat with the sea around it and just the texture of it shows, this is what, to me, coloration does. It's so extraordinary to look at, why there would be those greens and purples and tones right there. So with all the travel around the world, let me just say that the most extraordinary places I've ever been are Boston and New York. And so, and no one ever believes me on those things. So I'm going to take you back here to show why this place is so great. So this, first of all, is, we might as well start with sharks, because why not? This is a project that I was working with. This is Greg Skomel. He's tagging a tiger shark. This is in New York. And basically what they're studying or looking at, or when they tag sharks, is to understand the behavior. Where are they moving? How do they move through the open sea here? And so they've caught it, and then they're putting a tag on its dorsal fin. This is one way of doing it, where it's in the water. A second way is when they lift the shark out. This is a mako shark. These guys always have a very ferocious-looking eye, as you can see right there. And when they encounter you, they are very skittish and erratic. Anyway, they're putting a tag on both of these. You can see how rough the sea was that day, that I'm bobbing in the sea just over and over again, waiting for this. Here's what happens when a tiger shark, when they release it, you can see the tag on it, and then in real time, they can update and understand where it's going around the area. And some of the sharks that I've worked on in New York, they've been tagged all the way down to North Carolina and came back up in the same season, which is a pretty dramatic swimming distance. And here's what happens when you take a picture and you're a little bit too close, or I didn't mean to be this close. And that's the tiger shark. Although in this case, it was a juvenile, so it's all good. All right, this is with Greg. I'm in the air. Greg is in the pulpit on the front, and there's a great white shark. This is what you see a lot of in the Cape now. And here's why you're seeing them all. Here are all the seals. And so just a short hop, skip, and a jump from Chatham is to New York, which is where I live in Brooklyn. And this is a project that I've now been spending the last 4 years taking pictures to create awareness with the New York Aquarium and the Wildlife Conservation Society to create awareness about underwater wildlife of New York. It's probably the hardest place I've photographed because the conditions are much more challenging here. One, the animals are migrating through. In most places around the world, you know, with relative right time of year, certainly you can put yourself in certain situations, but in this, it's just open water. You have no way of knowing when or where something is going to be. And this is Long Island in the Hamptons, looking east towards Montauk, and on the right is the Atlantic Ocean. And from the air looking down, we have a very diverse habitat. Here's Great South Bay, which is seagrass and wetlands. And within this habitat, you see extraordinary animals such as pipefish. We see bluefish. These guys are in May, come in very cold water, in very shallow water, buzzing by. They're extraordinarily fast, and they whip right by you. It's a really incredible experience. We have scallops with all those beautiful little blue eyes. And don't be mistaken, they're quite fast, and if they see you coming, they skedaddle away really quick. We have nudibranchs. Here it is. You can see his dot of his eye in the center, and the green in the background is the algae that it's next to. Okay, here's the challenge of diving in New York and Boston. The visibility isn't that great. And the reason it isn't that great is not because it's pollution, but rather because it's nutrient-rich water. And it's all the plankton, all the algae in the water, all the food source in the water is what makes all these animals come rushing in here and why it's so rich to see photographically, visually, and from an animal's perspective. But this is a bait ball of bunker. This is what it looks like underwater. Now, it's hard to see here, and they're baited up fairly tight. Now, this is, I hope to see this more and more. This is a moment they don't ball up this tight all the time. There must be a giant thresher underneath them, deep, balling them up in this way. And one day it will come up for me through there. And here's what else we have are wrecks. Lots of wrecks in New York. And on these wrecks we have conger eels. We have sea bass, yeah, sorry about that. And sort of the gradients of blue mussels. We have hydroids. And then here we had mackerel. And this is a night I was looking for actually squid, but the mackerel came instead of the squid. And at night, while I was going for them, decided to photograph the mackerel instead. One baby squid came up, and all of a sudden the mackerel pegged it, and we never saw another squid again. But here's what happens on another day when a squid actually comes. Now, this squid didn't actually attack me or anything. It's on the dome, just grabbing on a hold of my dome, of the round part of the dome. And this is a moment for a photographer that's like a panic-stricken moment. One, do I try for the photo? Or two, do I worry that it's going to use its little teeth right there to bite my dome and flood my camera? Anyway, I quickly adjusted the lights, took one picture, and gave him a little nudge, and off he went. In the Hudson Canyon, 100 miles off of Long Island, is a flying fish. And then strange, scooty shearwaters, as they look at you and must say, like, what are you doing underwater here? But you can just see them. They dive underwater. They're really incredible. We have extraordinary animals that look ungamely and they're slow-moving, like mola mola here, but they're really fast. Don't be surprised. And people have seen them, although I have not seen it, jump out of the water and just fully launch their body out of the water. They're often very curious and will come up to people who are snorkeling. And here's what I think is the most beautiful shark of all the sharks that I've encountered, which is the blue shark. When we start to get really close to these sharks and they come right up within inches of the lens, you can see all the detail of how it can sense around. So it doesn't just use its visuals of its eyes, but also is using these other senses, much like a radar, to be able to detect probably lots of things around. We have sea turtles that are endangered, an endangered loggerhead sea turtle. And unfortunately, there are many problems in the sea as well. Here are sharks that have been entangled in nets, others from fishermen who let them go. But mostly I want to just highlight the things that are really extraordinary under there, which are mahi-mahi. And while I've been looking for a mako and haven't seen a mako the way I want to see it, we do have drifting seahorses. And this one is just hiding and hanging out with a little grain of seaweed 20 miles off of the coast of Long Island. And lastly, we have a man-o-war. You don't want to touch these, but those two fish are man-o-war fish. And the amazing thing about this is on the one day of the sea, it just stopped. The wind just paused. And when it pauses like that, you can see through the water. And this is taken from a boat as we positioned ourselves. And so it's really just a matter of time on the sea for that. One of the extraordinary things in New York is these ancient mariners or horseshoe crabs. And every year they have an annual migration. And on this migration, which is really important for seabirds to come through, they're dependent on the eggs from these horseshoe crabs. And here you can see them. And then here you would see that they're mating and reproducing. This is taken under a full picture of a moon at night. They come in by the thousands. And in parallel, the red-knot seabirds come in by the thousands. And this is extremely important. This happens in Cape May, New Jersey. And if the horseshoe crabs are not there, the red knots would not be able to make their journey all the way up north through to Canada. And because I work with Central Park Conservancy sometimes, you need to be able to show the plaza in the background, one of the turtles that probably was released by someone who bought one that didn't want it. But nonetheless, an inspiring picture that was sort of an idea that captured from other photographers who've done only surface level photographs of wildlife in the park pond. So I'd like to jump to a little bit of high-speed photography and to show you a little bit about a few different things. So when taking high-speed photography, normally you shoot cameras that have about 1,000 frames. Let me back up for 1 second. First of all, in high-speed photography, you need a lot of light. And in doing so, a normal camera shoots about 30 frames per second. Video, TV, for the most part, 30 frames per second. If you want to use a camera and it says high speed, usually it's 60 frames per second. That's not a hard rule, but on most cameras it's 60 frames per second. Sometimes it jumps up to 240 frames per second and they make it smaller. Okay? The cameras that I'm using are up to 1,000 frames, maybe 10,000 frames per second. And we did later, but I don't have it here today. We used one of the world's fastest cameras that was doing 10 million frames a second on a project with the Museum of Science to look at lightning as it sparks and generates movement. But what we're interested in here is how things move and sort of that invisible balletic movement. And this is what it looks like to start to shoot with these kind of cameras. And this is a project that is with a good friend of mine, Alan Adams, who's a physicist. It's with Jim Bales, who works as assistant director of the Edgerton Center, and has just been a joy of a project to work on. And so I thought what I would show you is what you won't expect to see, something that is slow-moving that looks really cool under high speed. It's 1,000 frames per second. It's about 20 times slower than what your eye sees. And what this is a jellyfish. And you can just begin to see all the subtle detail and movement, which to me looks like just a water, just so beautiful. So the way this plays is it would play back 30 frames per second just to give you a sense of it over 20 times slower. So you capture that many frames and it plays it really slow. And don't be mistaken of it looking static and still. In photographing this, you can see there's like a white dot. I'm moving the camera and panning up with this at the same speed of the jellyfish moving. So it gives the illusion of stability and stable. But if I just left the camera, it would be out of frame like this, and you wouldn't have the shot long enough. The other technology that we've been working on a lot, which is looking at 360-degree cameras and how to understand how things move in spherical dimensions. Now, normally with a camera, I'm shooting in one dimension, but learning how to shoot in all around you is a whole different world. And so in order to show you what this experience looked like, again, this is collaboration with Alan. This is working with MIT, a collaboration with the Museum of Science and their planetarium to help do this. We decided I went into the giant ocean tank and thought I would share with you what it looks like to dive in the giant ocean tank from 360 point of view. Now, you can see me very faintly like you would flatten the Earth out if you looked at it unraveled. I'm all the way on the left and I'm all the way on the right. I'm in the worst possible spot. And you can see the multiple cameras moving around. And I really like this for the artistic interpretation of how we view ourselves. And you can see that we're feeding the fish and I'm inside the tank. Now, the experience that you will see, I have to pause and jump over here. Is this is me here. Now, I'm just going to turn around a little bit and show you what it feels like to be in the giant ocean tank. And if you ever wonder, well, what's happening up here, we can see up here too. And so it gives you a full frame of way to do this, to experience more than one perspective. And at some levels, it's a little nauseating, and in other ways, it's really great. But it's in its infancy, and you can see that with my hand in the bottom left, that it sort of looks like it's missing. This is where the stitching overlap isn't perfect yet. You can see that I'm not holding any item, but really I'm holding the camera as we're doing this, and there's a pole there that is invisible. And if you're wondering where all that food's coming from, you need only turn the camera around to see that he's feeding over here. And if you want to look up, then he must be around somewhere, or maybe it just happened. Oh, there's the arrow. You just watch this swim around. I do like this one part here. We'll go the other way. I'll straighten you guys out. I'll say this, that one of the challenges of using this kind of equipment, it's been, first of all, there are many challenges along the line. Mostly light is a big factor on the underwater 360 modes. But the one other real challenge of doing this is learning how to view something in a way where not all sides are as interesting as others. And so often or not, our perspective, and in a world that we really live in, we really don't look around us all the time so crazily. And the camera sort of begins to give us that perspective of not sure where our point of view might be. But it is a really fun and interesting space, and I think the underwater world is a great place to take people into a world where we're totally immersed in a situation. And the dome in the planetarium was particularly enjoyable to do this. This is Arowana. It's in the Amazon. This is all taken at the New England Aquarium through glass. You can see a small little cricket up on the top. Okay, you see it accelerate through. And land down. Shooting these at the high speed has been, it's actually the joy of what we're working on now more and more. And I think the goal is to how to get this into an underwater environment, how to push ourselves to be able to capture faster speeds or slower speeds. And the way you take these pictures in high speed, because you can't react fast enough and all the time, you set it to take a picture a second, it records, it's constantly recording, and when you capture the shot, it records for maybe a second or two before or after the image that is taken. So you're able to guarantee that you capture that moment, and then you look back at it and watch it. And this whole process of each shot that you take can be anything from, 10 minutes to 20 minutes to watch and render to even see if you got something. So the process of really capturing these over and over again is quite difficult and slow. May not have it on here. I'll show you the lightning if you want to see that. All right. This is taken with a still camera. This is a project that was done with Don Campbell back there as well, Alan Adams, the Museum of Science. And what we wanted to do was photograph how lightning moves. And so first, the way we did this was we looked at how do you do it with a camera? And so you want to open the shutter, and you take it over a long exposure here, and you capture the light moving back and forth. And this was an extremely wonderful experience. So then I said, okay, well, we'll go down, we'll use a fast camera. And they said, well, what can you get? And I said, well, we can get a camera that's capable of 100,000 frames per second. So I went in there thinking, oh my God, 100,000 frames per second, we're going to get a great shot. I'll be very happy. We go down, we start taking the pictures, and we use the camera, and it sparks. And we don't really get anything. And I'm like, oh my God. And I think Alan probably knew deep down inside I wasn't going to get anything, but I don't think he wanted to tell me just because he was giving me a hard time. And anyway, so the next thing I know, we don't get anything, no better than a standard camera. Turns out that the Lightning is moving way faster than a camera that's capable of 100,000 frames per second. I was better just opening the shutter. So I thought we would be in difficult, so we wrote and pitched an idea to this Hanlon to ask if they would be willing to work with us to lend us and to come down and to lend us a camera that was capable of shooting at 10 million frames per second. And would they work with us on this project? So he flew in from California, and we all set out to do this. We set up, Don was really helpful. He made a tripwire that would send the time so that we could trigger this thing, because your reaction is nowhere near fast enough to capture these images without some sort of device to do this. And so what you saw here, this is at 10 million frames per second, and what we discovered here is here you can see the spark of lightning right here in the center, and what you would see is it grow out and out and out. To give you a sense of what that is, that was about 20 frames. Okay, 20 frames of 10 million frames per second is about the speed of what we had here to capture this. Oh, well, that was the lightning. Here, this is, sorry about this, but this is the superhero of all superheroes. It's a little bit of this is a poison arrow dart frog as it climbs at about 800 frames per second. So what we did was, this was shot at the New England Aquarium. It was, we just misted up the glass in the front, and then he climbed up. And you can see it's totally incredible. He would just grab a hold and could literally climb a vertical surface. These things are absolutely incredible. And you can see him breathing. And this is the joy of high-speed photography, in that the slowness is really wonderful of it. He does jump, though. There's one other shark one I wanted to show you. Maybe I'll take questions while I look for this one. I better take questions while I look for that.
Well, let's thank the speaker, actually.
Thank you.
With all the predatory fish and animals in the sea, I was wondering, because I had a brother who surfed from Ogunquit to New Jersey, are they dangerous for people who are surfing or in the water?
The sharks?
Or anything. I mean, you had such an array of them that I was wondering if they're dangerous, whether they're further out than people surf, or...
Yeah, I think my experience with sharks is that in order to do shark photography, you have to bait them in close, to be honest. And I have had lots of experiences with sharks. They're not like mad predators that are just erratically moving. There are dangerous places to be, in that they're places where they could get confused. They could be in water that's shallow, that's murky, that's where they're looking for other prey and make accidental attacks. I think most of them are really do what's called like test bites on people, but they're just big animals, so they don't necessarily intend to do the damage they may be doing. They're quite cautious sharks, actually. So the answer to your question is yes, there are some areas that I probably wouldn't go surfing. I'm not sure I would surf right next to the beaches where all the seals are in Chatham, right? But I would surf in other places. And I think that the challenge is not putting yourself in an area where there's likely to be some of those dangerous moments in there. But I will say that one thing that I really want to reiterate is that they're typically very cautious in the way that they approach. They're not just coming in hot from around the corner and flying in towards you. Quite honestly, I don't even think you'd know they were coming towards you because they would come in from another side or another angle or something like that. But I would say to most people, do not worry, the chances of encountering them, I never see them when I'm not looking for them virtually. And so, be careful in the areas that they know are trouble, I guess is how I would phrase that. Yep. Oh.
Wow, two up here. I don't know what that. Three up here. Okay. I think the gentleman was before me. Okay.
The high-speed shots of the fish, you said you had to, the camera tracked.
Not the camera, me. We had to track with it.
Okay, how did you keep the frame from showing the movement of
Yeah.
this?
Great question. So it's on a tripod, and you would pan and tilt with it, and if the movement was too erratic or too quick, you would see that, actually. But it's on a very fluid head, so it's a very smooth transition like this, and the movement isn't so great. You're not, like, whipping it up in that kind of speed there.
You're actually doing it with your hands.
You have to do it manually. And quite honestly, the other thing you have to do is you have to adjust focus manually, because as it changes, its focus changes as well. So if you're shooting something small with a macro lens, you have to be in rhythm shooting, panning, and focusing all in real time. And it's confusing because you can't over or under focus wrong, because you will see that in slow motion. It becomes extremely obvious to you that you're off. So a little mistake in there makes big differences. And I can only say that it came with lots of practice. We spent lots of time. We made lots of mistakes doing this.
Thank you so much for the footage. It's fantastic. I wanted to ask you whether you would speak a little bit about what you might have seen in terms of the impact of climate change on various sites that I'm assuming you visited multiple times over the course of the last few years.
Yeah.
In my own experience on expeditions to the Great Barrier Reef, things have changed in terms of 3 years since 2013. We've had multiple bleaching events. What have you seen? What has struck you?
Well, I can tell you this, that everywhere you go in the ocean, the timing is off now. If the things are migrations of this time, if the seas are supposed to be like this, it's all off sync a little bit now. We have seen that a lot of, not always the mass bleaching events that you see everywhere, but there's definitely bleaching of coral everywhere you go. Definitely the seas in the Caribbean, it's hard to find a Caribbean reef that is healthy. The only place I've ever been in the Caribbean that's beautiful is in Limones National Marine Park, which is a park there that's still has the gorgeous elkhorn coral and beautiful, looks like what a reef looked like ages ago in the Caribbean. You know, the problems are the obvious. The climate change is a real issue. The overfishing and the fishing are real problems. And in places like in the Philippines, the truth is that as the populations increase, the people who have to go fish there, they have to take these little boats and go further and further out to sea. And you might say, well, it's not so bad to go further out to sea, but really the implication of further out to sea for them is that there's squalls every day at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so those pushing distances or make the pushing coming back to back to land a real challenge for them. And so I haven't, in Madagascar, we saw the start of climate change, of real bleaching, but I wasn't there in Australia to see that, and in the Phoenix Islands, they also, I believe, had some. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. I'm curious, How long do you typically spend underwater at one time on one of
Yeah.
these photography expeditions? And what is it that limits the duration of those? Is it the amount of air you have available, or is it in cold water, maybe just a temperature issue?
That's a great question. I would spend as long underwater as I possibly can. I'm limited really not by, I'm limited by air is a factor. Temperature is also, but to a less extent, you would wear enough to be comfortable in those things. So it's mostly your air that you're limited by. And sometimes the objective of where you're going, like they may say, the currents can switch oftentimes on you. So a lot of places are very tide dependent. So for instance, you may have 45 minutes and that's all you get because once the tide and current switches in slack tide, you can't hang out there long enough. A lot goes with depth. If you're really deep, you have to be prepared to handle the deeper depths, and that requires all sorts of other air and time and stuff. And so really it's a matter of being prepared for what you want to photograph and being under there. Unfortunately, the reality is that all the fish like the strong currents, right? Sharks stay in strong current because it's convenient for them. And so you have to hustle through this and you're kicking really fast, but when you're exerting all of your energy to stay in those places. So you're really only limited by what you're prepared to be in the conditions for.
You mentioned the Limones Park in the Caribbean. Where is that located?
Not far from Cancun, no, ironically of all places, huh?
Probably can take about 3 more questions.
Have you done any photography in colder waters, like northern waters at all? And what kind of sea life would you expect there?
I haven't been to the Arctic or Antarctic, and I haven't been to any of those under ice conditions. That's on my future list of places to go and things to do. But I would say the coldest water that I've been diving in is really locally here. Quite honestly, it gets pretty cold under there. At the surface, it could be like 60 and 50, but when you're down to, if you go down to 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet, that temperature can drop to 40 degrees, and at 40 degrees and 50 degrees, it's pretty cold under there. And I can tell you that you're cold when you have to move the arms of your strobes, and you don't want to move your own arm for fear of being colder.
Okay, maybe 2 more questions. There's one over here. Oh, 2 more over here.
I was curious what, if any, advances in photography have come about and made
Yeah.
your work easier, and any that you would hope for, because we work in the deep sea, and seawater attenuates light, so unless we have Jim Cameron with us,
Right.
we can only see.
Well, the cameras are changing fast and very rapidly, and the sensors are becoming pretty sensitive to a wide range and spectrum of light. I think, obviously you want more sensitivity to light and you want to work with light. That's the 2 main things you're always looking for. I think it's not an easy question to answer, but I think, that range is what's there. What I can tell you from an art and a photography perspective, as I see these cameras becoming more simple, as I see Jobs' dream of everyone who can take a picture with their iPhone and gets these incredible shots now, you see that the power of photography is really the illusion of photography and really capturing the image the way you envision it to be. And all that these other cameras do in many instances is they capture these moments really quite beautifully, because the difference between light inside and outside is very different and can be really hard to photograph. And if you asked me to do that, I might spend all day setting that kind of shot up. And now these cameras do that very effortlessly, very easily. But what they lack in the ability is how to compose the subtler things, the motion to it, the aperture settings. And so in some ways, I feel like there's a strong education on understanding the appreciation and the aesthetics of the photography of what makes an image in looking at those elements, because they, in quick glances, get skipped over, but in lined up, they really become readily apparent. And so in answering your question, I hope the innovations of this technology moves forward tremendously. More sensitivity to light and better lighting and lights that can go deeper and stay longer would be great.
One last question. I think it was over here.
Hi, Keith. Thanks for doing the talk, and it's great to see more of your work. What I was wondering is how marine debris might have impacted your work and that in your experience with it, because I've heard stories from some photographers where they have to physically move things out of the way before they take the shot to make it.
You mean like trash would be there that you're moving?
Yeah,
out of
and
the way?
plastic pollution being so prevalent.
I guess people do those kind of things. It's not really the style of photography that I do. But I will say that what I do notice a lot is a lot of marine debris in the water. And what you notice a lot with that is actually animals sometimes adapting to using them. In open water conditions, they provide shelter for a lot of things. And it's really sad. You see these plastic trash cans drifting through or not trash, but just like plastic, trash in a bag, just drifting. And you'll see sort of fish hanging out near those kinds of things. And it's really amazing to see. But I think after storms, especially in remote beaches, we would go through and you see lots of trash, lots of plastic that are just up on the beach at the high tide mark that come in a couple of days later after those types of things. And it's really quite sad that it's not there or removed.
Okay, so let's thank Keith again.